Hi, this is Scott. I really appreciate our sponsors because they make the show possible. Today's show is sponsored by Developer Express. Become a UI superhero with Dev Express controls and libraries. Deliver elegant .NET solutions that address customer needs today. By leveraging your existing knowledge, you can build next-generation touch-enabled solutions for tomorrow. You can download your free 30-day trial at dx.hanselminutes.com. That's dx.hanselminutes.com. Hi, this is Scott Hanselman. This is another episode of Hansel Minutes, and today I'm talking with Daniel Shiffman. He's a programmer. He's the project lead with the Processing Foundation. He's got an amazing YouTube channel doing creative coding, video tutorials, the Coding Train, and he's a professor at ITP. How are you, sir?
I'm doing very well. Thank you so much for having me.
I'm thrilled to have you here because you are doing the most. People say, oh, Scott, you do YouTube and you do podcasts and whatnot. And I say, look at Dan Shiffman's green screen on his freaking YouTube. You're doing a lot of fun stuff, and I like it because you're always positive and you're always trying to move kind of knowledge forward for everybody.
Thank you. Yeah, it's some of this is in a way, the YouTube channel in a way almost happened by accident, which is that I just was making videos for my students here at this program where I teach. Mm-hmm. And so, I didn't get to this thing in class, or I kind of messed up this thing in class. Maybe if I put it together in a video, I can show it afterwards, and then start it. And, it's kind of an amazing discovery to realize if I start putting stuff up on YouTube, then other people might actually watch it too. So now it's been a little over a year that I've had this channel. It's kind of been amazing to discover the audience.
That's kind of how the Khan Academy started, right? It's like, we were doing Skype and I figured I would just record a YouTube channel and then it became a thing.
Yeah. The one thing that I did that was different, which I don't know whether it was out of vanity or some other bizarre reason, but you mentioned the green screen. I decided that in the videos, I wanted to appear in the video to speak kind of directly to the audience as opposed to be the disembodied voice. Kind of appearing over just a computer screen. So that to me has kind of really made it, as soon as I did that, then suddenly I discovered, I'm doing a thing. And so now I guess I'm doing a thing, which is my YouTube channel.
Well, and you've got this wonderful opening where you appear as Prince, and it's like you have a music video. Did you write that music video, or how exactly did you decide that? I don't know. It's just you're unapologetically wacky, and I love it.
Yeah. Well, so I was thinking about the channel in a way as I was inspired originally by a show from my childhood called Reading Rainbow, kind of bringing literacy, bringing reading to everybody in the world. The kind of classic lyrics of "I can do anything if I can read a book," and so I kind of think about learning to program in that same way, find this sort of wondrous, magical power of being able to create or do anything, and so. When I started doing the videos, I tried to think about it, is this, instead of just being a tutorial, can this be something more like a show that people would tune in once a week and kind of be inspired and watch and learn about programming and making creative things? What it turns out it actually is me getting stuck and debugging all the time and making a lot of mistakes, which strangely enough has also been something that the feedback I get that people seem to really enjoy. That time when you couldn't figure out, when you were stuck for 15 minutes, you couldn't figure out what was wrong in your code and you went through figuring it out. I learned the most by watching you figure it out. And so I think people can really relate to that. Anybody who programs can relate to that experience.
Why do you think that that's so important? Because when we were trying to decide what we would talk about on the show, one of the things that you'd said was that, we could talk about how I make these videos where I mess up and then show the world how incompetent I am. It seems like that really does help people not just learn, but also maybe feel better that their favorite professor or YouTube person really is just trying to figure this out like the rest of us, that it helps with one's imposter syndrome.
Yeah, for sure. And it's, I think also I don't have any scientific data to back this up, but I think that sometimes if you're watching a step-by-step tutorial that is kind of done in a slick way and everything is planned out and scripted in advance, it's a little harder to grab your attention or for it to maybe soak in to your brain as opposed to a process where the actual figuring out of the thing is happening in real time. So there's almost a drama or associated with that I think works in terms of the learning as well. But mostly it's just that I think that everybody who, I get this with, this is a classic thing that I have every year. So I have in the class that I teach here at ITP, which is a program at Tisch School of the Arts, which is part of New York University, we have a class called Introduction to Computational Media. And so we have about 80 to 100 graduate students many of which are learning to program for the very first time. And somewhere about halfway through the semester, one at a time, they'll all come in to talk to me and say, I think I'm the only one who's not getting it. Everybody else has all these amazing homework assignments, but mine, I'm really not getting it. I'm not able to figure, I think I'm behind everybody, but everybody really has this same feeling. So, to be able to recognize that and see that in that a teacher who's teaching the stuff goes through that same getting stuck, can't figure it out process, I think is important.
Yeah. I feel also that that as men and then as white men, it's important for us to also realize that as we are out there making mistakes in public and being wacky about it, that some people feel really paranoid about making those mistakes and maybe feel like they can't make those mistakes. But it's important for us to show them that it's okay to make mistakes like that, and maybe make people feel like they make them feel safe to make those mistakes and be okay with it.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really important consideration. I know that, I have the luxury in many situations in my life of just kind of like walking in with my beard and glasses and people kind of assuming I must know what I'm doing. But
well, he was a nerdy guy, right? Oh, okay.
But and there are some cases where I do, but there are tons of cases where I don't. And I think sort of the being willing to take a risk and explore something and try something new is part of life and part of creativity and part of working with programming software, frankly, as things are so rapidly changing. And it's not really about memorizing this one thing, but just learning how to learn, so to speak.
Yeah, exactly. It's learning how to learn. And one of the things that you and I have in common that I think is really exciting about the work that you're doing and with Coding Train particularly is that you were also involved with a theater company. And I did theater as well as stand-up comedy. And I got that when I saw you present. I was like, I think that we are similar people.
Yeah. Oh, wow. I'm glad you figured that out. I'm basically just like a failed musical theater actor.
See, I actually had failed stand-up comic in my Twitter bio for many years.
I never tried stand-up comedy. I think I think I would do well at like the physical shtick, but the writing is such a, you really have to have good written material, which has never been my strength. That's one of the reasons, like, I don't prepare at all for my videos. I just kind of fumble about. But, I did spend time, and I really, I'm still a huge musical theater fan, and I'm, always have this fantasy of maybe I'll just like bring in some songs to my YouTube channel, which probably will be the moment where everybody starts unsubscribing. But it does that thinking about how to treat teaching in a way as a performance, and about how to have fun with it and play with it, I think is something that, certainly matters in the sort of internet world of tutorial videos.
Mm-hmm. So when you're teaching, do you have as much energy? I mean, you can't really make every class every day performance. You would, I don't know, I would get exhausted.
That's a good question. I think I'd have to check with the students to ask them. There have been some, it's funny because I do recall some days where someone would come up to me, hey, you were a little low energy today. Is everything okay? Because I think I do have a bit of a, certainly not 24/7, but at least when I'm presenting or talking through code or a math problem or, anything related to something I'm excited about, I do have a kind of tendency to get kind of excitable almost to a fault in some sense. So I think, have a similar approach while teaching, but the context is different. I'll be less, I think I probably do a little bit less shtick when I'm actually in class with a smaller group of students. And certainly when students are presenting, I take their work very seriously and try to really listen and provide thoughtful feedback as opposed to just trying to make a weird, stupid joke.
But it seems like when I've seen you speak and when I watch your videos, that you're almost imploring them, like, don't you see how cool this is? Like, this is amazing. Like, like, let's just pause for a second so that you can all drink in how cool this is. That way everyone has that sense of empowerment. That seems like something that's missing from a lot of learning material these days.
Yeah, well, one thing that helps with this is, so I do, part of some of the videos, I do a variety of different things, but some of them I'm calling coding challenges. Most recently, I just made Minesweeper, which to me seemed like really people are interested in that, but I got that as a request quite a bit. So, and I don't prepare for it in advance. So, and then I think there is a kind of, I often do actually have a genuine excitement or thrill when I actually get it to work, because it's a little, first of all, it's a little scary that I might not be able to figure it out and get really stuck. But there's just a delight in having the sort of strange algorithm that you started typing and you're trying to debug and get to work suddenly run and suddenly really work. So I think that helps, as opposed to this is my rehearsed PowerPoint slide lecture where I'm going to go through one at a time and make sure I hit all of these bullet points.
Mm-hmm. Have you ever started one and then gave up 40 minutes in? You're like, I'm not even going to upload that.
Well, let's see. Well, so one thing is I do all of this live. So I have a strange process, which I'm still not sure is a good idea or not. But what I do is I will just press that button that makes it run live. And I'll usually stay live for somewhere between 1 to 3 hours, doing a bunch of different things. And some of that is just kind of me middling about, tinkering around with the computer, trying to download the right library files to get set up. But,
right.
So once I'm finished with like a session, maybe I'll do a couple different coding challenges, one tutorial on a certain topic. Those will get edited into shorter edited videos. So people can always go back and see the longer live stream if I've had live streams where I have a 30 to 45 minute debugging session, which I don't know that anybody really wants to watch. So I have both contexts available. And there have been a couple times where I think I've been like, let's just leave that in the live stream. Let's not make an edited version of that. But for the most part, and I actually just last week, I'm trying to learn about machine learning and neural networks. And so I discovered this thing that I was teaching, you kind of need calculus for this. And so I thought, I'll make a couple videos on some calculus topics. I studied that stuff. And so those I haven't released yet, but they felt somewhat disastrous to me. But I am going to release them, so we'll see what the feedback is like.
Interesting. That's funny. You never know what people are going to watch. I did a 3-hour debugging Docker thing that we thought was going to be 30 minutes. And, we still had 100 people watching, and it was mostly just me with my head in my hands, going on Stack Overflow and trying to figure out why ports wouldn't open. And people were like, yeah, that was great. And I was like, really?
It's very dramatic, strangely enough. And also, what's great is having that live interaction. It's a little bit hard for me to follow the YouTube chat, and I'm trying to figure out different ways of having more interactivity. But it is, I do get, I have a couple really loyal viewers who I consistently are always fixing my mistakes, and almost can, at this point, anticipate them in advance. Yeah.
So the tool of choice amongst many, but your tool of choice has been pretty clearly this thing called processing, which you do tutorials and examples and libraries for. Why is processing so important in the larger scope of programming as a practice?
So it's a great question. And I'll try not to give too long of an answer to it, I suppose. So processing, just for people who might not be familiar with it at all, is actually a project that started in 2001. And because I have such a presence on YouTube and in tutorials, people often mistake me as a creator of processing, but I'm not. Processing was created by Casey Reese and Ben Fry, who were students at the MIT Media Lab under John Maida at the time. And for them, what it really grew out of was, we're teaching and making creative work in the field of visual art and graphic design, possibly broader than that, but just to put it in those terms for a second. And there wasn't really a tool that they could use easily for teaching and for their own work. And so processing started, and there's a lineage of projects like this that facilitate creativity and graphics through code for beginners, like Logo and Design by Numbers and other ones that I'm sure I'm forgetting right now historically. But one of the things that that I think made processing so great back then is it was built, and it still is, processing itself is built on top of the Java programming language, which allowed it to be easily extendable with libraries. So you had this simple programming environment that you could download, run, type a single line of code and have a circle or a rectangle or a line on your screen in a kind of almost like Turtle Graphics logo-like way. And yet there is the opportunity for depth there and for communicating with hardware and video cameras and doing data visualization with this because you're actually writing Java code at the same time. So that's kind of where processing came from. And for me, the reason why I got involved and have stayed with it is really just is kind of that story of it's processing at this point is less the programming language and environment and more the community and the philosophy of making these tools accessible, easy, friendly, inclusive to a wider community than just software engineers and computer scientists. And that really started with artists and visual artists, but has grown so much since then.
Okay, so processing started out as this kind of its own language, its own opinionated thing built on Java. But then there was processing JS, and then there's a thing called P5, and it gets a little confusing to know whether I'm using processing or not.
Yeah, it is confusing, and it's particularly confusing because processing.js is a project that's started by John Resig, the creator of jQuery, and that's a separate. There's lots of projects that people have made that are libraries and extensions or inspired by processing, and so processing.js is not a project that is maintained by the Processing Foundation, which I'm kind of skipping around here because. But P5JS is. So processing.js is a JavaScript library that will automatically translate your Java processing code into JavaScript so that it runs in the browser.
Oh,
whereas
cool.
P5JS is a new project that has a similar API and sort of like landscape of features that processing does, but is a native JavaScript platform where if you're learning to use P5JS, you're actually writing JavaScript code yourself. And so one of the things that happened in the last few years is, those of us who are contributing to and working on processing thought, we should really do something to make sure this tool lives on. The world is littered with many open source projects that are like exciting to like make and release in a weekend, but it's really hard to maintain these things and to keep the community alive. So we formed like a nonprofit 501c3 foundation corporation to raise a little money and kind of also just really make the statement like this is something we really care about and we want to always be free. So and at the same time we were doing that, Lauren McCarthy, who is one of the first people, she was maybe technically the third or the fourth, but one of the first fellows. We run a fellowship program where we give a stipend for somebody with a speculative or experimental software code project. And her project was, what would happen if we reimagined processing in today's web, in today's cultural landscape? So not really just about like what's the new snazzy shiny HTML5 ES6 thing, but also just like how do we make a better, more inclusive open source project using tools that are out right now, as opposed to processing have really started as a project of 2 or 3 or a small number of people.
Okay, so I could teach a class or learn in a class where I'm do processing in a local IDE, and extend it with Java. But then if I wanted to move it into the web, P5JS is kind of the polyfill, the runtime, that native JavaScript alternative to processing that lets me have do the exact same work I was doing locally, except on the web, and it's officially supported by the foundation.
Correct. And there's some key differences. For example, processing has a really robust 3D renderer built on top of Joggle, which is Java OpenGL. That's been in development for many years by Andres Calubri has done a lot of the work with that platform, and it supports shaders. Whereas P5JS being newer, it has kind of a experimental WebGL renderer, but doesn't have as much 3D features. P5JS has some hooks into DOM manipulation, a P5 DOM library that allows you to do a lot of DOM stuff, but really do interfaces, which processing doesn't have as easily. So there are differences between the two environments, but the fundamental one is desktop versus web for sure.
Mm-hmm. And why do you feel that processing is so important? I mean, there's D3JS, there's a ton of different things. It seems like D3 has become the one for statisticians and for the New York Times, but you're promoting processing for artists and animators and architects and regular people.
Yeah, I have no interest in promoting processing to the exclusion of other things. So, D3 is like amazing, and I would
point taken.
Love to use it.
It seems like this is the choice of artists, I guess.
Yeah. So I think that one thing that we really try to stay true to, which is challenging, is that processing and its related tools are a place for the total beginner. And not that other things aren't that as well, but it's really important that one of the things that you can do if in a workshop that you're learning to code with processing is that right there in the first 20 minutes you can download this thing, you can hit the run button, you have a window, you can type line, and you have a line. And what we're trying to do, we're working on a new web editor for P5JS that has a kind of similar quality in the browser. So you don't have to know about HTML or CSS or anything. You can peel back the layers later to learn all that stuff. But I'm thinking about what's a ninth grade Saturday afternoon after school workshop for a couple hours. What can you do in 2 hours that you just kind of like open up this thing and suddenly you've got some experience with coding. But that also gives you the depth that you could get further with. There are pathways to moving beyond P5 or processing and using D3 or using C++ or Node.js application. So to me, that is that to me has been the sort of like the sort of core philosophy that is really key to why I care and love processing so much. But mostly it's just kind of like I just love all the people that I've met and have worked with, and the enthusiasm for the project and the community. So I think that's great.
How much is processing a language in that it is it is a programming language in and of itself versus a framework on with a bunch of functions on which you sit on top of?
That's a great question, and this definitely is a confusing gray area. You could probably get different people to give you different answers. So I would sort of fall on the side of processing almost not being a language at all. And really, I think it's okay to create the illusion of that in a beginner course where you're first starting to learn, and maybe you think that you're learning processing and maybe think of it as a language. But ultimately, processing and, so first of all, well, okay. The thing about processing itself, just the Java version, it really, there's nothing about it that isn't 100% Java syntax. And you could import any Java library and use it right in the processing editor. So in that sense, it's like a simplified Eclipse, but it just has all of these processing libraries built into it. Mm-hmm. That said, there are some, for people who might be technically interested, there are some small things that are done with a preprocessor that will make us, we have a color data type, which is really just an integer. So you can type color, it's the equivalent of typing int. You don't have to write whatever. I don't even know what this is anymore because I use processing so much. Public string void arg main blah blah blah. Whatever. You don't need the main and the main class, and you don't need to extend this. You can kind of get started in a simpler playground. But ultimately, when it gets compiled and run, the language itself is Java. P5 has no preprocessor, so it really is just JavaScript, and P5 itself is just a JavaScript library. And I should also mention, while we're here, the third project that we maintain as part of the foundation is something called processing.py, or Python mode for processing. So it's a mode where you can run the processing development environment and type all your code using Python, but run the same kind of visual sketches and visualizations, but write all your code in Python. And actually, this summer, we're participating in Google Summer of Code, and one of our Google Summer of Codes projects is called processing.r, which is a speculative idea of seeing if we could get a R mode for processing where you turn on processing, you switch the mode to R, and you type your code in R.
So processing for all people.
Yes. And yeah, I mean, to me, this is key. While processing started as a very specific thing, I do think that the way of thinking, the way the API is designed, the way the community it works, those are the core elements of processing for me.
Mm-hmm. I remember when it very, very, very first came out in 2001, and because it happened to pick processing is kind of a general word, I was like, how is anyone ever going to go and Google for that? It's like, you type processing, you don't get to the answer or the definition of what the word processing means. You go right to processing.org, which is pretty fantastic. And then you're right there on the homepage.
Yeah, it actually used to be processifying, which instead of 2 S's in the middle, it was 2 5s. And that, I can't remember if the original reason was because the domain wasn't available or it was to try to help with the Google search. And that's actually where the sort of shorthand P5 comes from. The old style processifying, which is a pretty terrible thing to have to say. So I think I'm happy, even though processing has its Google search problem, in the end, I like the name.
So it's been 16 plus years, started by students, and now there's a foundation. How challenging has it been to deal with or manage the idea of this foundation? And people still think that they can run an entire class or a whole school all about processing and then not pay anything for it.
Right. Well, it's a great question. I'm glad you asked, because I guess I could plug some of our new fundraising things that we're attempting to do here. But so one thing I say, what's always been interesting to me is there's often a misconception. I'll find someone will come up to me or I'll talk to me and ask questions about processing and sort of think of it as there's this like institution, almost like Adobe. Like there must be this building somewhere where all the hundreds of people are working away to develop processing. And really over the years, it's always just been kind of volunteers and nights and weekends. And, over the years, as, a lot of us core maintainers are, getting older, have different commitments, it's been sort of harder to keep that going. So that was really the impetus for the foundation. But, and we've had conversations about, well, should we charge for this, not charge for this? And I think we've come to the conclusion that it's very important that this is free and open source. But free doesn't mean it doesn't cost anything to make it. So what we've started doing now is we have a kind of NPR style membership program where you can sign up to become a member, an individual member. The suggested donation is $25 per year, and we have institutional members if you're a design firm and you use the software, or you're a school and you teach with the software. So we're asking people to support the foundation. It's for at least for U.S. individuals, it's a tax deductible donation. And what we're doing with that money is funding development on the software, fellowships around diversity, community, and education. And you can find out a lot more at processingfoundation.org and see the kinds of initiatives and things that we're running and using the money for.
Okay. So this isn't like going to your rent. This is about supporting the foundation, the people who support the foundation, and the multiple people, the many people that write code to make processing and all of its varying flavors work.
Yeah, we published a Medium post that goes through kind of how our budget works and what we spend the money on, which people can probably find. You can also find through the website. But yeah, the primary use of the money is we have a few staff or employees who are kind of helping to administer and run the programs around different initiatives, and in particular around advocacy. And then most of the other money goes to our fellowship program and also like hiring developers on a kind of ad hoc basis to work on projects. Every once in a while that we use a little bit of the money for travel, for people to get together to meet and that type of thing. But yeah, it's still a very small budget.
No, I understand. I just think it's important that people understand that open source is much more than just people in their spare time. And it's inappropriate for people to go and demand support for this free software that they were not involved with in any way and did not give any money to in any way.
Right, and I have a real luxury in that I have a full-time job at a university, and part of my responsibility in my job is to do, I think the word is research or something like that. But I consider my contribution to open source and administering the Processing Foundation and working on developing these tools part of my job at NYU. And I think that a lot of other people who would like to contribute and get involved with open source, it's not so easy to volunteer and have the time to volunteer. So we want to make the developer community really inclusive, that people who can volunteer, but also people who want to participate, but funding would really be help, whether it's for a daycare or rent, that we have some resources to be able to do that as well.
That's fantastic. There is so much great information at processing.org. There's tutorials and there's the huge reference. You can install it and get all the different flavors that we talked about. And you can also go to Check out Coding Train and all the great creative coding video tutorials that Daniel has made. And he's also got a Patreon to help support that work that he does, again, on the side, because you just love to teach, it sounds like.
I do. I think, there was a while where I thought, oh, am I an artist? Am I making like art with this code stuff that I'm learning about? And then I think I discovered, no, I think I like just helping other people I get more kind of enjoyment about just figuring stuff out and making it easier for other people and seeing what they create. So the one thing I really love that I'll encourage people who are listening, or if you make something, if you saw a tutorial, made something in processing, please share it with me, because I really do enjoy seeing the wide variety of stuff that people are creating.
Very cool. Well, thanks so much for talking with me today. I really appreciate you.
Thanks so much for having me. This was really fun.
This has been another episode of Hansel Minutes, and we'll see you again next week.